Hello everyone, my name is Melissa Semprano and I will be doing an informal code review of 3 projects I've completed, but I thought I would introduce myself to you first. So, I was born and raised in New Jersey. I've lived in Northern Virginia for the last 6 years, and I've been an ultrasound tech for the last 12 years. I noticed that ultrasound has been physically demanding on my body, and it's not a career I could see myself sustaining for the rest of my life, so it was time to go a different route. While researching possible careers, I kept circling back to software development. I remember back in the day when I used to have a Neopets account, and I would use HTML to edit the background and change the color schemes and the text and the sizes and add videos and all sorts of cool stuff that I just had a blast doing. And I know it's corny, but I still remember the theme song that used to play every time I loaded up my Neopets account. And, you know, that's kind of why I kept circling back to software development, because I thought maybe this is something I can have fun with. But after going into the medical field, I lost all technical knowledge and skills. I could barely turn on a computer, and I was intimidated by the idea of going back into computer science. But I began my computer science journey anyway, and I enrolled at Southern New Hampshire University, and I signed up for a Bachelor's of Computer Science in January 2023. I'm currently in my last semester, and I will be finished by the end of April 2025. There was a very steep learning curve for me along the way. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I quickly learned from them. Honestly, I think the mistakes I made were great assets to learn as much as I have. I've learned a lot about troubleshooting, that's for sure. Trial by fire, right? That's the best way to learn. That's how it's worked for me. But I went from being that girl that can barely turn on a computer to the girl that's completing full stack programs in just a short period of time. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else I can learn in my career and graduating and, going from there. But that's enough about me. Let's get into the code review.
Alright, so I'm going to take you through the scene itself. So I do have a couple of hotkeys where it automatically takes you to a certain perspective in the scene. So I'm just going to go to my favorite one because it takes you all the way out and you can see it all. The first thing we set up was mouse movement. So with the mouse movement, we can kind of look wherever we like, into the void of black space in the background, into the scene itself, up, down, whatever way you want. The mouse follows it. There is a feature where there's a scroll back speed, but you need the mouse, and I don't have a mouse with the wheel right now, so I can't demonstrate that portion, unfortunately, but I can demonstrate the hotkeys. So with the hotkeys, you can pan in, you can pan back, right, left, up, down. All the navigational components you need are pretty much set there. I think I did a really good job editing the vectors to lay out the objects and got it pretty close to what the original image looked like. It's not perfect by any means, but I'm very proud of it. It wasn't easy, and let me tell you why. So initially, when I started the scene, I thought, okay, let's take a look at a pyramid, right? That's easy. That's one shape mesh. That is just a pyramid that I can just color the different sides, and turns out it wasn't that easy. So let me show you. I ended up needing to use 3 pyramids. So the 3 pyramids merged together, and if you look closely at the top, you can kind of see a little bit of a split. So I had to really get creative with the vectors and kind of get them as close as possible to create the look of one pyramid, but I had to overlay 3 different pyramids with 3 different colors to get this different face on each side. the book originally, again, I thought it was going to be easier. I thought it would just be like one shape or one mesh, and it ended up being a couple. So I believe this was 3. I did 3 box meshes for this one. So I did a box mesh for the pages to replicate paper. I did a box mesh to show the cover. And then there was a box mesh on the side to add the binding to it. One thing I did struggle with also, which I didn't realize would be a problem either, was and now we're going slow, was the sphere. So when you take a spherical object and you try to apply a 2-3 texture to it, it doesn't translate that well. So it looks fine from the front, but if you were to go to the back of it, you can see that it doesn't look the way it should. The lines don't quite line up. So in order for me to get the soccer texture, I actually created my own clip art for it. And then I added it to the sphere. So you can see that it's just not perfect. It's starting to get a little bit messed up here. So one way I probably could have fixed that was by downloading a different texture that was meant for this, but I couldn't find any textures that really applied. So I kind of just created my own, and unfortunately this is a little bit skewed and it's not perfect, but I did the best that I could, and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm proud of it, actually. So took a little bit of creativity and ingenuity, and I made this scene what it is now. So let's get out of it. All right, so like I mentioned before, this was a starter code that I added extra code to. But I'd like to start by showing you the View Manager file, and this is where all of the navigational components are. This is where we have like the mouse and the keyboard movements, and all the hotkeys. I had to add, let's start with the mouse. So I had to add a mouse callback function. So anything you see of like a million parentheses, that was me. And that was my way of differentiating that I did something as opposed to what the original code had. So anyway, back to the mouse position callback. First, it records the mouse's movement, and then it calculates the vertex position, and then it adjusts the values to move it to a new position. I also had to do a scroll callback speed, and this is very similar to the mouse callback position, but it calculates the speed of the scroll and mouse as well. The next step was the keyboard events. So you have your escape sequence. So if you hit escape, it exits the scene. And then you have your basic navigation movements. So there's, for instance, you can zoom in with W, zoom out with S. A is left, right is D, and so on and so forth. And then as I demonstrated earlier, there's a couple of key options to change the perspective of it. So this will like automatically set you to a certain point in the scene. So this designated position here. And you can see that I've added a couple of little extra comments to kind of remind myself what vector does what. What I would like to do is add a couple more, like do all 3 vectors, honestly, X, Y, Z, and just have one portion where it demonstrates what each vector does movement-wise. I feel like that would be helpful for anybody looking at the code or anybody who wants to edit the code a little bit. Let's see. The code, I feel like, correctly implements the design. It enables the users to navigate the scene. It's well structured, it's consistent in style and format. There's a couple of arithmetic operations, and they all use floating point integers, so you won't have any bugs or issues arising from there. All loops in here are properly nested, and all statements within the loops belong in a loop. They don't belong anywhere outside and have no purpose there. I do have some inline comments that I should remove, as they don't really add value right off the bat. So when I go to fix this, I will probably edit up the inline comments a bit more. Like for instance, this added a mouse scroll callback function. Nobody needs to know that I put that there. No, they just need to know what that portion does. So I'll clean that up a little bit when I enhance this project. But I do think overall the comments are easy to understand and they are placed appropriately. I wish there was a way to reduce some of this code in and encapsulate it a bit more, but there's no redundancies in it and they all serve a purpose, so I think it's pretty well laid out. Let's get into the next page. So the next file I want to show you is the scene manager. This is where all the JPEG textures and the shading materials and the lights and shape meshes are set up. So this is like your bulk of the content. This is where most of the code actually is. The beginning half of the code is storing and implementing values. So you can go through here and like scene manager, add textures, structures, just a lot of load in and add in at this point. Let's see. And this is where you can call out the textures. And then pretty much overall setup here. Then later on, it gets to the portion where I can edit. And this is where I really started to do a lot of work here. So for instance, this first one is where I loaded my scenes. So I can choose up to 16 scene like JPEG images or PNG images to upload. And I chose 6 for my scene. But looking over this, there's actually a texture that I don't need. I did not use the sphere texture anywhere, so that serves no purpose in this code right now. And I will have to remove that when I clean it up. Let's see. Then below that, we have some material definitions. So this can give like a glass appearance, a gold, a wood appearance. And these have all of the accompanying vectors and shine and everything in order to produce that texture within an object. The next thing I had to do was set up some scene lights. I added 2 scene lights. I felt like 3 made the whole scene a little too bright, and I preferred the subdued look of just the hint of lights. I thought they looked better that way than overly bright. So this is where you position your camera for the light, and it kind of the vectors and all this is tweaked to change the angle and direction that the light hits the object. The next thing we had to do is prepare scenes. So this is where we had to load textures, define object materials, set up the light, load all of your shape meshes. Right here you can see that I added a comment here, and really it should be above here. I don't know why I separated that from that, but that's something I can do when I refactor it. Then there's the render scene portion. This is basically where you're just setting up the methods to add instances and be rendered. And then this is where we get into the nitty-gritty of creating each object. So here, this is the render background scene manager, and this is this actually combined 2, if I remember correctly. Yep, so this is doing the background wall and then the tabletop. I combined the 2 into one method to kind of enhance and clean it up a bit, but now I see that I need to rename this from render background to something more appropriate, perhaps just, well, I'll figure that out when I get there, but I will change that so it makes more sense later. The next thing I added was also a little bit messy, unfortunately. I added a flattened white sphere to the scene. So here's my complex object with the like the sphere and the cone for the ring toss toy, but it's a little confusing with the comment, and I did render sphere and render cylinder. What I really should have done was combine it into a render complex object scene, or maybe just a render ring base, whatever other name I can come up with. It has to be better than that. But I should combine these two objects because it's meant to produce one object, right? So I'll have to go back in and change that a bit. Let's see, and then there's render pyramid. This one is laid out better. This is 3 pyramids all together, so you can see that like I have a left base, I have a right base, and then the initial pyramid. I could probably clean up the inline comments there, and that's how I should have done the complex object all in one spot. So that's something to do later. The next is the render book scene. This is where you see me add in a couple of different things. And this was done appropriately where they were a couple of meshes combined in one method, which, again, being a little hard on myself, I should have done that with the complex object first, but I'll do that later. Then there's the render soccer scene, and this one was easy. It was just a sphere. The hardest part was just getting that texture to look as good as it could. The ring was overly complicated for me. I spent entirely too much time playing with the vectors, trying to figure out how to lay that ring over the edge of the book. So yeah, so overall, I really need to clean up those comments and combine that one method. Naming practices need to be a little bit clearer. But overall, most of my naming practices were pretty clear, like render book. It's pretty self-explanatory. It pretty much explains what part of that code is implemented. All arithmetic operations are consistent. The structure is consistent and functions properly. There's that one line of code that does need to be removed because I'm not using that texture. And there's a couple of other files, like header files, that I'm not really going to go over. Those they just kind of help the setup. Let's see. So yeah, this just basically helps set up all of the functions, like load in textures, lights, and scene objects. But I don't really need to explain that in detail. If you have questions about that later, I'll be happy to answer that. So let's talk about my enhancement plan. So my plan is to clean up the comments, obviously, reduce unnecessary portion, combine some methods, and then I would like to add another complex object to the scene. I'm not really quite sure what object I'm going to add yet, but I'll be sure to add a finished scene update on this page after I do so. And that concludes my code review for this project. So I will see you all for the next code review. All right, so I am going to walk you through project 2. Project 2 is using the Eclipse IDE and Java. For this project, we have to work with an array list of search and rescue animals, including dogs and monkeys. They're tracked by name, breed, gender, age, weight. Monkeys are tracked by all of that, but then there's a couple of additions like tail, name, type, body, and species. We were given some basic starter code. Then next to complete the intake methods for the dogs, and then complete a driver class by adding a menu loop for displaying the prompts and actions. We also need to create a monkey class that inherits from the rescue animal class, and then create a rescue animal method and create a print animal method. So let's run through the project. Let's not run through the project. All right, let it go. So as you can see, our prompt menu, this has a couple of options on it: intake dogs, intake monkeys, reserve animals, print a list of dogs, print a list of monkeys, print a list of all animals that are not reserved, and then quit. So the first thing I want to walk you through is just the list of the dogs. So we'll hit prompt 4. And then as you can see, there are 3 dogs here with all of their details. And I'll walk you through what happens when we do an intake with a dog. So it asks for the name, it's asking for all of the prompts: name, breed, gender, age, weight, acquisition date, acquisition country, training status, if the dog is reserved or not, country, and then it says dog has been added to the system. So now we'll print a list of the dogs again, and you can see that there are 4 dogs, so that dog has been adequately added. Let's just go through the coding portion now. So the first one I want to show you is the rescue animal class. This is where all of the setters and getters are for each method. The dog and monkey class both inherit from this class. Then there's the dog class. This one's pretty simple. It has accessors and mutator methods, and then it has the string prompt for collecting data. The monkey class is similar, but it has a couple more. Where are we? Monkey class. Monkey class is similar to the dog class, but there's a couple more accessors because there's a couple more requirements for the species. But yeah, same thing, just all of the accessors and the mutators, setters and getters. And then the driver class. The driver class is where the bulk of the code is. This is where the array lists are like scanned and parsed through. Let's see. We have a while loop with the switch method in it. This is for each case. This is where people will use their prompts. And let's see. What else do we have here? There's a couple of starter lists. So this is the initial dog and monkey list that we started with. And let's see, what else do we have here? So this is where we have our prompt, where we collect data from the responses and it goes into the input. And same thing for the monkeys, same thing right here. There's an input validation method just to show the species type. These are the accepted species. What else do we have here? There's a complete the animal reservation. So this is where we intake the animal part, and then we confirm if they can be reserved or not, or if they're available. And then we have the print animal list here. This is where we iterate through the arrays and they can print out the results. So, things I think I can improve on. Well, I think that some of the inline comments need a little bit of a workup. I think that they don't really, some comments don't add value, and then some do. It just needs a little bit cleaning up so it's better to read. I also don't love the indentation here, so I would probably want to go in and make sure everything's indented correctly. Maybe it is, maybe it just doesn't look as appealing as I feel like it should right off of the bat. Like, I don't think this should be all the way over here. I think it should be indented a little bit, but I'll visit that later when I'm doing my cleanup. The enhancement I would like to do is to do a alphabetical sorting algorithm. I would like the menu to print out the animals in alphabetical order so it's easier for the user to read. So I'll have to add that to the driver class to augment the end result here. I think back to the code, I think it implements the design requirements well. I think that the naming practices are good, the loops are good, they're properly nested, and that's all I really have to say about that. So again, the enhancement plan is to clean up the code, proper indentation, inline comments, and then add that sorting algorithm. So that's all I have for this project. All right, welcome to my third and final informal code review. This project was completed in Android Studio IDE using Java and some XML files. It's an event tracking app that tracks dates and times of upcoming events by allowing a user to store and edit event details. There's also a mechanism that sends an SMS notification on the day of an event. There should be a main screen for users to log in as well as to create an account. The home screen needs a grid display of upcoming events with dates and info. Users should be able to add, remove, and edit event details. All data will be stored in two database tables, one for login information and one for event details. I was really excited about this project, but it didn't quite end up with fully functioning project. I spent way too much time designing the screen layouts and didn't really get to the database portion. I did a little bit of a rudimentary database, but it just wasn't fully functioning, so I was really disappointed about that part. But let's just look over some of the screens that were here. So the main screen that you log into is the initial screen where you would have to log in. This has a couple of options where you have a logo, has some text prompts. You enter your email address, your password, you can log in. If you don't have an account, you can sign up. And then if you don't have an account, that will bring you to the, let's see, create account one. That's the Java file. We need the actual screen. There we go. So on the create account page, you can enter an email address, enter your password, confirm your password, and then sign up or log in. After you log in, you would end up going to the home screen. And this is where it would display a grid of events. You have a quick click button where you can add an event. So let's just go to the add event screen. Create event, there we are. So with this one, you can input your date of event, event name, details, add event, and then go back to the screen you were previously at. Then you're back to the main screen. Let's see, so there's also a sentence where you can enable the SMS notifications. You could delete all event data and then you can log out as well. That should cover all of the And that just about covers all of the items. So this is just an event item recycler view. So this is for the grid, for the page that displays all of the events. This is where it kind of stores the date, name, and details. Let's go over the Java files then. We'll start with, let's go with the database because that's where I failed. So in here you can see I started with the SQLite or SQLite. It depends on how you say it, SQLite or SQLite database. This has variables and versions. The first version, you create a table with its the name and the columns for storing items. Then you have something where you can pass a method where you can pass in the variables. There's constructor for the database handler, methods to create a database, methods for creating a database. You can see here that there's no usage. I actually really like the Android Studio IDE because it tells you if something's being used or not. So that's pretty nifty. And then there's a method to add username to the database. And then you close the database after completing all of that. The notification manager, I clearly having issues with because I'm getting an error here on the XML file of it. And then a couple of methods have no usage at all, like check if an instance is null, set the username, save. Yeah, a couple of these need to be fixed here. So I'll have to go over that. Let's see. Yeah, so overall, I think I did a pretty good job on this, but there's clearly some stuff that needs to be reworked. Like I said, I was really excited about this project. I still think it was done well. Naming practices are good. There's consistency in the code, documentation, the variables. The loops all look good to me. Let's see. Yeah. Anyway, there's obviously some errors or else this will be running properly. So I'll have to take a closer look, debug some more. I'll start by reworking the database to get that portion functioning, and then I'll scrap the current database files and start fresh and use a new SQLite database. Then I'll have to add a few edits to the main activity file and hopefully it will be good to go. But I am excited to see this project once it's finished because I was really sad about not actually completing it. But thanks for sticking around for my code reviews. After viewing them, I've noticed that I say a lot, so that's another thing I'll have to work on professionally. And thankfully this code review is just informal. So anyway, that concludes my review. I hope you have a good rest of your day.